Hello and welcome to this episode of YouMatter, where I am once again with my great friend and colleague Joanne Elphinston. We are going to talk today about an aspect of your experience in the clinical room, or one we hear about a lot, which is the idea, is my patient happy? And there are some concepts that we're going to dig into around that relate to coaching, but I'm just going to let that all unfold in the conversation. So, welcome again to YouMatter, Joanne.
Thank you so much. It's delightful, as always, to be here with you. This is our little space where we get to just jam on each other.
Exactly, and that's what it's going to be. This is not me interviewing Joanne, this is just us having a conversation, isn't it?
Mm.
So, we both agree that, is my patient happy? Am I doing a good enough job? Variations of that statement are something we hear quite often. Um, I'm thinking with coaching clients, definitely, but with clinicians I work with, posts I see online from clinicians, are you finding the same?
Oh, absolutely, Joe. I would say that almost 100% of coaching clients that are clinicians, and a lot of people when they come on to GEMS courses as well, the big thing that does start to surface is, I'm worried that my patient is happy or satisfied. And that's a source of ongoing stress. And then there's the secondary aspect of, am I good enough? Because then
Yeah.
we on ourselves. And as you know, you and I have talked a lot about this, and this is so avoidable. And it's not that complicated to be avoidable.
Yeah, and here's me going down possibly a rabbit hole straight away. Bring me back if this isn't helpful. But um, it's interesting, isn't it, how that is such an important thing for our patient to be happy.
Mm.
Almost like that is the goal. Where do we pick that up from?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because actually, it's not about happiness.
Oh, you've frozen, Joanne. Oh, you're back again. No, it's all right. You're back. You're back.
Sorry about that. Yeah, because if we take out the happy part and work out, well, what is it that the patient doesn't come in to say, my goal is to be happy. And that's the first interesting thing, that we've already gone off track into our own little world of agenda. When actually, if we just start with, well, what is the patient actually coming for? What are their hopes? What's their vision for this?
Yeah, and
And
that's
this is
the
when I
that's
want to.
really important part of the framework that we work with, that you and I work with, isn't it? Um, we Joanne and I teach this idea under the heading of agreements,
Mm.
and it is what it says in the tin. It's from the start making sure there is agreement between you and your client about what they came in for.
Mm. Absolutely. And, it's so interesting, Joe, because since we've both been working with this for a long time, and it's a part of both of our trainings from way back. And I would say that, every single patient interaction, it's so interesting how agreements are what locate both of us in the session and give us a calm place to move from. Because if we've actually both agreed on what's important today, that you've already probably agreed on what's important for the overall goal. But then at a session level,
Yeah.
what's important today, if you both know that, then you don't have to keep wondering, well, is the patient happy? Because you've both agreed on where you're trying to go. The other thing about that, though, is that people think that, right, that's the commitment for the whole session. But I think we've all been in a session where we're like, do you know what? We were heading this way, but it turns out I don't think that's actually going to be the route today. And somehow people feel like they've got to just make that first thing happen rather than going, do you know, I think there's going to be a better way forward here. This is what I propose. How does that sound to you? And then the patient can choose. Well, actually, no, I want to persist with this, which is fine because they've decided that that's what they want to do, or they decide, actually, yeah, I'd be willing to look at another angle here. But you've made another agreement.
Mm.
We're making
Yeah,
a
and the other way as well, sometimes you find that a session is just taking a different course, and at that point, rather than just going, oh, well, we seem to be going here and hoping that's okay, you check in and go, oh, we seem to be taking a different tack here. Is that okay? Is that what you want to do? And again, as you say, if they say yes, great. You can do it with confidence that that is what they wanted, or you've just done a really good job of highlighting that, oh no, actually, that isn't where I want to go. This is the patient. Let's get back to what I said. So I don't know. There seems to be often a sort of thought that you shouldn't ask. Um, I hear lots. I have lots of conversations with, from doing one-to-ones with people where they or a bit of supervision or something, and say, "Oh, I didn't. We had these 3 sessions. I don't really know if it was going the right way, or I did this thing, and I don't really know if they were happy with that." And almost to the point of being irritating, I'll usually say, "Well, did you ask them?" And it seems to be just that people don't feel that they can. Like we do the telling, we don't do, or we ask certain questions, but not those questions.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're very good at the telling, and we think that's our job.
Mm.
And we think that's informing the patient, and therefore that's part of what we should be doing as the expert in the room. However, first thing, are we the expert in the room? Well, we're the expert on the stuff that we know. And of course, the patient is the expert on their first person experience and have so much insight to offer if we but ask them.
Mm.
But I really picking up on what you're saying there, Joe, is for some reason we think we have to hold all of this inside and not
Mm.
actually share it. And along with agreements, one of the huge parts of coaching for me is this idea of transparency.
Yeah.
Oh, we could actually put that thought that's going on with us out into the room. Because as you say, it's just like, sometimes, let's say, worst case scenario, you've taken that 3 sessions and you kind of don't really feel like it's going anywhere. And then you're there worrying about it. But it's so interesting when we say to the patient, right, let's just take stock here. How do you feel we're going at the moment? Like, what's your feeling about where we are at the moment? And it's so interesting because sometimes they're like, well, I just don't feel like we're really heading in this direction, in the right direction. Fine. Then you get to ask more questions
Mm.
about what that might be. But I've been really intrigued with how many times I've asked a patient in that situation, expecting them to say, I'm not really thinking we're going anywhere. And then they kind of turn around and go, actually, I really want to follow this because I think there's something here. Or they tell me
Mm.
they're getting something out of it that I'm completely not expecting. And that's intriguing too. And if I hadn't been transparent and asked, I would never have known.
Mm. Yeah, both ways. It's all information and stuff you can move on from, carry on same direction with, change tack. It opens up the options and it settles that part of you that is making up the answers to the questions that you're not asking.
Absolutely. And I mean, what better way to make somebody feel heard
Mm.
than to actually ask them and something and actually give them the space to express it?
Yeah. I had a conversation just today with a physio who said something really interesting and insightful. She said, "Oh, she said, I tell you what, I hate the biopsychosocial approach." And I was interested because she's a very good and experienced and very empathic clinician. And she was saying that's the problem. She said, by the time I've acknowledged the bio, the psycho, the social, and all the other things that are going on, then, which one of those do I decide to focus on? Invariably I can get really stuck in the one that probably isn't the thing, and then I'm spending 2 sessions on the fact that the patient's having a terrible time with their mum or something like that. And so we had a conversation about agreements under the question, which lots of people listening will have heard of, the what matters to you most today in all of this.
Mm.
And she said, yeah, I do know that one, but it doesn't really work for me. And we sort of battered around a few different variations. And in the end, she liked to simply, where should we focus today? And she wanted some variation of where is my expertise best placed today? And that probably isn't something you would say in those words to a patient, but just like, okay, I could help you in a number of ways from the things we've talked about. Where do you think my help is going to be most valuable today? Something like that.
Yeah.
But I knew
Um,
exactly what she meant. We're taught to open up the smorgasbord. And then what if you pick the wrong thing? But it goes back to you don't pick the thing, you have another conversation about which thing.
Absolutely. And even in those discussions, just as you say, Joe, sometimes someone will say something that you think, ooh, and a little bell rings, and you kind of hear a bit more. And it may be that you say, that there's something really interesting there that we can perhaps look at in a little bit more depth. Is that something you're interested in, or shall we keep moving forward,
Mm,
in the story or whatever it is? And it could go either way, because sometimes people are like, well, nobody's actually paying the attention to that.
mm,
Yeah, that would be great. And so we do, but we've
mm,
had agreement.
yeah.
And we haven't taken on, because as you say, we've got this kind of paradox of opening up all these things, but then deciding to take control somehow. And of
Mm,
course, I know people will be listening going, but isn't that our job to know which way to go? Well, that's when we can wield our bit of knowledge and say, this is what I propose for this session, and this is what we can realistically expect where we can get to. How does that sound to you?
mm,
And sometimes a patient comes in, and yesterday I had two female patients, two women, two exhausted women
mm,
going through lots. And one, we would normally be moving her back work on in a certain direction. And she's just white with exhaustion. And and I looked at a few things and she's really locked up. She's been crouching over a computer, blasting out high stress work, just like, shall we just look a little bit and see if we can help you to move a little bit more freely? Can we take a bit of tension out of your system? She said, that would be great. And bless her, dare I say it, I did some hands-on work with her. We looked at the movement wheel that was really, really stuck beforehand. We did some work. We talked while we were doing it. We got some breathing happening. We got back up. She had color in her face and she said, oh, I feel so much better. And she was standing in herself in a way that was no longer stressing her back. So actually, her back was much less painful. She also got the experience of understanding the relationship between where she puts her body under stress and why
mm,
creates more pain. So she made that agreement. It
yeah.
wasn't me saying, we have to, move on forward with your program. She was just like, this is what I need. And when she left very satisfied,
Mm,
ready for next time for us to pick up the reins for where
great.
the program's going.
And I can see how that kind of interaction, it in a very natural way, it provides the opportunity at the end for your patient to reflect on really how successful you've been on your agreed aims in that treatment session, as opposed to I'm thinking back with a wry smile of my Maitland days where you were taught to do
Mm.
your however many modes it was, stand them up, retest the movement which you decided was the problem, and
Yeah,
then somehow try and convince yourself and them that that was different.
yeah.
And it was all predicated on something you had decided from the start, something you then decided to do and then reassess. And lo and behold, if the patient's a people pleaser, they'll sort of smile at you and agree. But as many other times, just look at you quite confused. And of course, that's such a confusing process, isn't it? That your patient probably feels no understanding of or involvement in, and no ability to reflect. Well, Is that better? Whereas if you actually agreed what it was you were trying to change at the start, then it's much easier for the patient to assess at the end whether it has changed or not.
Absolutely. And look at the difference in patient agency. So the
Yeah.
first example is absolute passive, isn't it? The patient is utterly passive in the entire interaction versus the second situation where the patient has been active in the choice and engaged in what's actually happening and why, and then able to actually give that feedback at the end. So, arguably, in both scenarios, there has been some form of manual therapy.
Mm.
One is very passive, and the other one is actually actively a way for them back into their bodies again, a way for them back into understanding what's happening and actually leaving with, she left with a far greater understanding of the
Yeah.
relationship between stress and why her back pain gets worse.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so
what might help next time?
absolutely. And, I look at it and see the struggle people have with this is, but I'm the expert. I'm supposed to be
Mm.
the person who drives this forward, has the plan, and all of that. And I think sometimes people get into a little bit of an identity crisis. You see, if I'm not actually driving it all, am I am I fixing them?
Mm.
And so that kind of relates to that thing as, oh, my job is to fix them. So then again, we have the patient as the receiver. And you can have that dynamic, but that is going to lead you to an entire lifetime of, but is the patient happy? And therefore, have I been good enough
Mm.
ad infinitum?
Yeah. And I think, Joanne, the biggest distinction in this approach is, as you said at the start, the number of times you repeat and revisit the agreement, because lots of people do talk about the great phrase, what's most important to you today, or what have you come here for today, what can I do for you. People will often say, oh yeah, I do that at the start, but that's the only time, and it's almost like that's a new box to tick. But then you're back in the world of, okay, so I've done that bit. Right, now I'm back to default fixing. And it's that willingness to go back again and again and again and keep agreeing, keep checking in, keep being vulnerable enough to put stuff back on the table, rather than just gloss over any misunderstandings or discomfort on your part or their part.
Mm,
I think it really is that continuity,
mm.
which is where you see the value of agreements. It's not just a one-off. I'm listening to you in the first instance. It's I'm listening to you, and every time things change, I will listen to you again.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it is really interesting because this, I mean, agreements, it sounds easy, doesn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, there are skills to learn. It does sound like, oh, well, it's fine, I'll just keep asking. But as you say, that that vulnerable space is sometimes difficult to sit with if you're
Mm.
thinking, I can drive this forward. But I mean, we've all been in the situation with a new patient, and it quickly becomes evident that this subjective is complex and long, and you're starting to worry about the time. I've got to get an objective and some treatment, and oh, and what's super interesting at that, there is a moment there where I've often had to say to the patient, okay, what we can realistically do today is I'd like to hear all of it because all of it actually is really important.
Mm.
We will have enough time to do that and have a look at some evaluation and get a clear picture of what our next step is going to be. Is that okay with you? Now, the patient gets a choice and gets to say then, well, actually, I'd really like to have a couple of things to go away with.
Mm.
Fine. I can say, that's fine. We will have to then not be able to hear all of the story this time. We can come back and you can reflect, and then we can look at that a bit more next time in order to make the space for us to do a couple of things for you to take home with. Does that sound okay with you?
Mm.
So in both instances, no matter what they come back with, it doesn't matter as long as then you frame it so everybody knows what's going to happen and we don't have expectations that have been missed because
Mm.
they were never brought into the room in the first place.
And the power of that last bit you said, is that okay with you? I was sort of in my head playing the part of people listening to this suggestion that you might have to, the patient's talking and they're really getting to their story and they're probably, looking very thoughtful and introspective. And then you come in and go, effectively, I need to cut this short. And I could feel my stomach going, oh, and then is that okay with you? That's what eases the way for both of you.
Mm.
You're not dictating, you're calling something out into the open and then checking in at the end. And, for people who do find it difficult to, well, just in that instance, if you think you would find it difficult to stop a very verbose patient and suggest that we might need to stop that story today and come back to it, just
Mm.
that last bit, is that okay with you? It's kind of it isn't there for a softener, it's there for the agreement. But in terms of our own comfort with a slightly uncomfortable situation, it's really helpful.
Well, haven't we all been in that place where like, that if you cut them off, that's going to create an issue and you
Mm,
get stuck with that. We've all had that patient. And to be honest, often that patient can have some really valuable information that you're kind of like storing. But yeah, I mean, sometimes, as I said, I gave a couple of choices and
yeah,
maybe I would have asked, well, what would you prefer
yeah.
we do with this time that we have? We have this much time. What is your preference for that?
Mm,
And now let's see if that, we can make that work for what the overall objectives are. So they
yeah,
have, there's a choice. They're making a choice.
yeah.
And again, that gives us that opportunity to go, okay, when we get to the end of our session, have we done what we set out to do? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So hopefully people are hearing that this process has obvious benefits for your patient in terms of being heard properly and being given choice, and also being challenged to make choice.
Mm.
But for you as a clinician, there are so many benefits in terms of settling that part of you that wonders and worries about it at home and takes that thought into the next patient and cumulatively starts to build up this concern of, is this patient happy enough? Are my patients, plural, happy enough? Am I good enough? This process, amongst other things that we teach alongside agreements, but I think you and I both agree agreements is absolutely fundamental to starting the process of creating this framework which actually keeps you safe and grounded as well as benefiting your patient.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Joe. I mean, yeah, it is. It's kind of really creates that wonderful start point, but there is a container then.
Yeah,
And as you say, when we look at what the pillars are that we have for coaching unpeeled, we're actually like taking that journey. But all of those pressure points that come up as clinicians, there are principles that can help you to ground the interaction again
yeah,
so that things can then start to move forward. Because I think we get to that point sometimes in a session where everything kind of grinds to a halt. I'm not really sure where to go next, but we just know we don't feel good about that.
yeah.
And actually, there are simple techniques which do take a little practice, and we do obviously, coach everybody on this, but they're not complicated, well known in some ways communication techniques, but knowing how to place them in a
Yeah.
clinical setting so that you're really upholding, your own ethics, but also upholding the evidence base because, hey, this is the absolute key to being patient centered,
Mm,
which is a term we see bandied around a lot, but not a lot about how do we actually do that.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Just being nice to people is not the same thing as being patient centered. But in this way, as you say, interestingly, if we can locate the patient with these techniques, we also locate ourselves in a place where we can retain our own equanimity.
Yeah.
And not end up at the end of the session going, oh, I'm not really sure how that went.
Mm.
Patient will come back. All of those kinds of things, which I know so many people, all of you out there listening, who hasn't had that feeling?
Yeah. And I think that's maybe just as a final point, that's the proof in the pudding, how you feel when you walk away from these interactions. It's in some ways it's similar to the coaching principle of boundary setting. And I always say to people, don't judge how you feel about the conversation you had, judge how you feel when you walk away from it, because anyone can learn a script of words and learn to deliver them. But that isn't the problem. You're all intelligent people, you can find words. It's whether you can deal with the feelings you get after an interaction that's the issue. And if you fancy it, play with some of these techniques, and then just as you walk away, think, okay, how do I feel about that? How do I feel in my body? How do I feel about the content of the session? What's going on in my mind? And I really hope it won't be, is my patient happy or am I good enough?
Absolutely. Because, I mean, we're not saying that we don't care how people feel, but whether there's a big difference between someone walking out feeling like, there's some satisfaction of that they've listened to, and that what they've come with has been respected and taken into account, and that they have been involved in the shaping of that session from beginning to end. There's something that someone leaves with there, which is not quite the same thing as, are they happy?
Yeah.
Because sometimes someone leaves feeling quite thoughtful and not sure how they feel because they've been introduced to a thought that maybe they haven't had.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're not that easy either. We
Yeah.
have sometimes tough conversations, and maybe the patient doesn't leave happy, but they don't necessarily leave unhappy or dissatisfied. They leave thoughtful, but not, so there's that huge difference, that distinction between whether they're happy or whether they do feel that they've had some value from the session.
Yeah.
That's
Did we do what we agreed? Yeah.
exactly. Which then gets us to, well, we have so much to share, don't we? We clearly
Yes.
love stuff, and we believe in it, and we want to help people.
Yes, Joanne mentioned Coaching Unpeeled a couple of conversations ago, and agreements is part of the 5 pillars that Joanne mentioned. We've taken this array of coaching, these coaching skills, and what we realise, because we are both coaches ourselves, trained, I guess, in regular coaching, we realise that there's huge benefit in distilling these skills down so that they're directly applicable in the clinic room, because it isn't the same as a coaching session. You are, to an extent, an expert in the room, and therefore the way you use coaching skills needs to respect that and be interwoven in a very particular way that wouldn't be the same as a regular coaching session. So that's what Joanne and I did over a period of 2 years and lots of coffee and cake in Monmouthshire. We thrashed out how to distill these coaching skills specifically for clinicians.
Absolutely, because I mean, at the bottom line with coaching is it's basically sound communication skills.
Yeah.
And sound communication, some self-connection, to understand the feelings we're having, that maybe framing how we're perceiving the stories we're telling ourselves about what's actually going on. All of these things are embedded in these pillars, these principles that we're talking about, and hence that's why it's called Coaching Unpeeled, because there's so much out there now. People are talking about coaching, and there's courses, huge amounts of information, but a lot of it is really not specific to the clinical setting. And so what we've done is we have literally unpeeled the concepts, which we both know very well. We've had to do great big multi-hour exams and all sorts of things on that. We know that stuff, but we're also clinicians ourselves. And we work with those clinicians. So yes, we've peeled away all the stuff that you don't really need to know, and then clarified the things that are going to be the most powerful for you to be able to apply directly, immediately into your clinic setting.
Yeah. And agreements is just one of 5 of those. So I think we're going to come back and maybe have a similar conversation about other pillars. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this conversation, and I will put in the coaching notes details of the next time we're going to run the Coaching Unpeeled course if anybody's interested.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jo. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Hopefully that has been cool.
Thank you, Jo.
Bye
Take care.
Bye.